Passengers escaped the burning wreckage of an Emirates airline jet, seconds after it crash-landed in Dubai. Witnesses report the aircraft was having problems with its landing gear and was making its second attempt to land when it crashed.
It was supposed to be the safest, most advanced passenger jet in the world. The pride of Emirates, the mighty Airbus A380, famous for its unmatched luxury, quiet cabins, and flawless engineering. But beneath the glamour, something shocking has just come to light. A disturbing discovery that has shaken the aviation world. A hidden defect, missed for years, is now raising urgent questions about passenger safety. But how could something so critical stay buried this long? Was it an innocent oversight or a billion-dollar secret kept quiet for years? Join us as we reveal the terrifying secret hiding in the world's most iconic jet. The A380, a giant in the sky. When the Airbus A380 first soared into the skies in 2005, it wasn't just another plane, it was a revolution in aviation. A double-decker super jumbo with 4 engines, capable of carrying over 800 passengers and whisper quiet despite its size. Emirates Airlines, known for luxury and ambition, quickly became its biggest fan.
With other carriers not seeing the importance of that A380, that's absolutely depending on their network. But for us, we believed in the A380 and we still do.
In fact, Emirates didn't just buy the A380, they built their brand around it. With over 120 A380s in their fleet, the airline transformed the aircraft into a flying palace. Onboard showers, private suites, onboard lounges. It felt more like a 5-star hotel than a passenger jet. People now wanted to fly Emirates. Videos of the A380's luxurious interior flooded the internet. Passengers posted selfies in the sky bar. Aviation geeks called it the crown jewel of the skies. Even critics admitted this was the aircraft that made flying feel magical again. But like all giants, the A380 had a weak spot. The only question was, where? Now this is where you'd want to pay more attention, as it gets even more intriguing from here. For years, nobody knew where the A380's weak spot was. Airlines bragged about its safety, engineers praised its performance, and airports redesigned terminals just to fit it. And despite its massive size, the aircraft had an excellent safety record, smooth, steady, and silent. It felt invincible. But everyone knows no plane is perfect. The aviation world has a strange way of revealing truth. Sometimes it starts with something small, a hairline crack, a strange vibration, or a routine maintenance report that doesn't quite add up. And guess what? That's exactly how this story began. Somewhere in one of Emirates' massive hangars, hidden from passengers and headlines, a team of engineers noticed something odd during a standard A-check, one of the aircraft's regular inspections. It wasn't something dramatic, and it wasn't obvious, but it was off. A tiny structural anomaly buried deep within the wing area of a single A380. At first, it looked like a harmless imperfection, a wrinkle in the metal. Maybe heat stress, maybe fatigue from long-haul cycles. So no one sounded the alarm, but protocol demanded further investigation. So they checked another A380, then another and another, and what they found changed everything. Microfractures, not just in one jet, but in several, and all in the same general area. All subtle, almost invisible to the naked eye, but undeniably present. These weren't cosmetic issues. They were signs of metal fatigue, signs that, under pressure, parts of the aircraft's structure were slowly deteriorating. And that's when panic began to set in. Because if there were cracks here, on a plane meticulously maintained by Emirates, what about the others flying around the world? Or the ones operated by airlines with lower safety standards? Was there a chance, however small, that one of these defects could grow silently, flight after flight, until something catastrophic happened? No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. Have we been flying on a ticking time bomb? Behind closed doors, urgent meetings were called. Airbus was notified, Engineers scrambled to analyze blueprints, flight logs, stress models. What they uncovered pointed to a potential design flaw, a weakness in how certain parts of the wing structure were bonded during manufacturing. It wasn't negligence, it wasn't sabotage, it was something more terrifying, an invisible enemy hiding in plain sight, buried inside a machine everyone thought was flawless. And for Emirates, this discovery was a nightmare. Their entire identity, their pride, prestige, and profits was tied to the A380. Admitting there was a serious issue could trigger mass panic, lost trust, even lawsuits. Passengers would cancel, regulators would swarm, and the media would explode with headlines. So what did they do? They went silent, and publicly, nothing changed. The planes kept flying and flight attendants kept smiling. But behind the scenes, something drastic was already underway. Maintenance records showed extended downtime, and a few anonymous insiders began to whisper. Aviation forums lit up with speculation. Was it a routine upgrade or an engine replacement? And it wasn't long before investigators caught on. And slowly, the web of secrecy started to unravel. Because this wasn't just Emirates' problem. It was everyone's problem. What began as a microscopic crack in a hidden compartment had now triggered a full-blown crisis. One that questioned the very safety of the world's biggest passenger plane. But was there an inspection? Yes. So what was the result of the inspection? The inspection that changed everything. It started like any other routine check, quiet, procedural, and unnoticed by the world. Inside one of Emirates' massive maintenance hangars at Dubai International Airport, a team of highly trained engineers gathered around a single A380 aircraft due for its scheduled inspection. These checks, known in aviation as C-checks, go far beyond the surface. Panels are opened, systems are tested, internal structures are scanned for signs of stress, corrosion, or material fatigue. The crew worked systematically, moving from one section of the aircraft to another. Hours turned into days. Everything was running like clockwork until they reached the left wing route. A junior technician noticed a slightly uneven surface texture on a support rib within the internal structure. It wasn't visible to passengers, it wasn't visible to pilots. In fact, it wasn't visible to anyone unless you were deep inside the belly of the plane, flashlight in hand, surrounded by wiring, insulation, and rows of titanium bolts. At first, it looked like surface-level wear, nothing worth sounding alarms over. But protocol demanded thoroughness. The area was scanned using ultrasonic testing equipment. A set of vibration patterns returned results that didn't match expectations. A second opinion was called in, then a third. Hours passed. Reports were double-checked. Diagrams were pulled up on screens. The verdict was unsettling. There was internal cracking in the rib foot joint, a part that helps bear stress between the wing and the fuselage. Individually, the cracks were tiny, but they weren't supposed to be there at all. More scans followed. The cracks weren't isolated. Other sections, particularly on the opposite wing, showed signs of similar stress. It wasn't limited to this aircraft, nor was it even limited to a single model year. Engineers knew what they were looking at now. These were signs of metal fatigue, the result of thousands of pressurization cycles over years of long-haul flights. The data was compiled into an urgent report and escalated to Emirates' upper engineering management within hours. The engineers didn't waste time speculating. Luckily, they acted. Additional aircraft were selected for targeted checks, particularly older A380s that had accumulated high flight hours. Within the next 72 hours, similar fatigue patterns appeared in 4 more aircraft, each one presenting cracks in slightly different areas, rib foot brackets, spar flanges, and certain stringer connections in the wing box. The findings were consistent. By the end of the week, Emirates grounded 7 aircraft for immediate evaluation. The internal code word for the situation became Echo Black, a designation used by the airline to flag any technical anomaly that could threaten operational integrity or passenger safety if left unresolved. Echo Black wasn't a term thrown around casually. It was serious. It meant it had potential consequences. And yet, no one outside the technical division had any idea what was happening. Publicly, Emirates continued to operate its flights. The grounded A380s were explained as being undergoing heavy maintenance. That wasn't a lie. But it also wasn't the whole truth. Inside the Emirates engineering headquarters, meetings turned tense. Discussions were no longer about the cracks, but about responsibility. Who had missed the early signs? Was it a materials issue? The spotlight shifted to Airbus. The A380, after all, was their creation. Emirates might have bought the aircraft, but Airbus built it and certified its structural lifespan. Within days, Emirates quietly alerted Airbus. A team of specialists from Toulouse, France, flew to Dubai under the radar. There were no public statements, no press conferences, just urgent technical collaboration behind closed doors. What Airbus brought with them was troubling. Early research from a 2021 internal durability assessment that had flagged similar fatigue risks in aging A380 wings, but the data had never been formally published or circulated widely. There was no evidence of a cover-up, but it was clear the warning signs had existed, and they had gone unnoticed, or perhaps underestimated, by both parties. Meanwhile, the cracks continued to appear. Across the fleet, no two defects were exactly the same. Some were clean lines, others were splintering. Some formed around rivet holes, others in bonding areas where the composite layers met aluminum alloys. In several cases, corrosion had accelerated the damage. One thing became clear: the problem wasn't isolated to Emirates. By now, the whispers had started. Airline forums picked up on unusually long A380 downtimes. Aviation journalists noted back-to-back technical delays. Spotters on social media posted images of grounded jets with engines wrapped and secured unusually long after scheduled maintenance. Inside the aviation world, people began to sense something bigger was unfolding. Back at Emirates, the internal task force grew. Senior engineers, material scientists, metallurgists, even former Airbus consultants were brought in. Each presented findings, and each flagged risk scenarios. Most agreed, this wasn't an emergency yet. But if the fatigue wasn't addressed early and aggressively, it could become one. But guess what? The challenge wasn't just structural, it was political. How do you tell the world that the most iconic aircraft in your fleet, the one that defines your airline's image, is showing signs of hidden wear? How do you explain that something supposed to last for 25 years might need critical reinforcement halfway through its lifespan? And what if the public misunderstood the facts and panicked? Emirates wasn't just protecting its passengers, it was protecting its empire. But the data didn't lie. Emirates needed a solution, and fast. One proposed plan involved retrofitting key wing components across its A380 fleet. But that would mean months of downtime, massive expense, and potential loss of customer confidence. Another option was to work directly with Airbus to accelerate development of replacement parts made from newer, more fatigue-resistant materials. That solution was technically sound, but logistically complicated. Airbus was already phasing out A380 production. Restarting component fabrication lines wouldn't be easy or cheap. Yet another idea floated within internal circles: retire the oldest jets early, quietly, and frame it as a shift to more fuel-efficient models like the A350. That way, the story could be spun in a positive light. Every option came with cost, none came without risk. By the end of the month, Emirates had already spent over $40 million investigating and managing the defect. And the deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a technical issue, it was a reputation crisis in the making. Still, no announcements were made. The story remained buried in engineering files, encrypted emails, and internal bulletins. But how long could they keep it that way? What this meant for Emirates, and how they responded. For Emirates, the timing was disastrous. Their A380s weren't just planes, they were the centerpiece of their identity. The fleet served their busiest, most prestigious routes. A disruption of this magnitude meant rescheduling, grounding, and operational chaos. But the worst part wasn't the cost. It was the realization that these flaws had likely been developing unnoticed for years. Buried deep within the aircraft, invisible to the eye, building pressure like a ticking clock. The airline brought in third-party aviation consultants to assess risk. Their report was blunt. Continued operation without significant structural reinforcement would be a gamble Emirates could no longer afford to take. Behind the calm face presented to the world, the airline's internal systems moved fast. Emergency retrofit programs were launched. Special maintenance crews were dispatched across multiple continents. Logistics teams scrambled to secure parts and replacements. There was no denying it anymore. What they found wasn't just alarming. It was a clear and present danger to everything Emirates had built its reputation on. And the silence was no longer sustainable. The plan was airtight, at least. That's what Emirates believed. And inspections were quietly expanded. Older A380s were pulled from rotation without fanfare. Staff were briefed to keep details vague. Even suppliers weren't told the full scope of what was happening. The entire operation ran like a shadow program, but secrets rarely stay buried in the aviation world. At a major maintenance facility in Europe, a contracted technician noticed something strange. An Emirates A380 that had only recently been serviced was back, this time under tighter security and with a completely different maintenance checklist. The technician, curious, snapped a photo of a diagram labeled High Stress Exposure, Rib Foot Analysis. He didn't think much of it at first, but later, when another engineer, one with access to Airbus maintenance channels, mentioned hearing about similar inspections happening in Asia, something clicked. They weren't isolated. Something bigger was going on. The photo made its way onto a private aviation forum. At first, it drew little attention. Just a few comments from enthusiasts trying to interpret the technical jargon. But within hours, the image was reposted with speculation about crack formations and structural fatigue. A former Airbus employee, anonymously using the handle Delta Torque, chimed in with a chilling claim. Emirates had grounded multiple A380s for urgent structural review, and Airbus was involved. Within a day, the post had spread. Aviation bloggers picked it up. Small YouTube channels began theorizing. By the end of the week, the forums were flooded with questions. Some claimed to have friends working in airline engineering who had heard similar whispers. Others dismissed it as overblown paranoia. But the silence from Emirates only added fuel to the fire. Then came the leak that changed everything. An internal memo, meant only for top-level engineering leads, was quietly sent to a journalist who had covered the A380 program for over a decade. The memo didn't mention catastrophic failure, but it did reference accelerated material fatigue and urgent structural integrity assessments. The journalist didn't publish the document. Instead, they reached out to Airbus and Emirates for comment. But guess what they did? They didn't give any reply. That silence was louder than any headline. Back channels within the aviation press began digging deeper. Pilots, engineers, and even retired airline staff started talking. Some anonymously confirmed the sudden surge in wing inspections. Others said Emirates had been unusually tight-lipped about routine maintenance. But it was too late. The whispers had become headlines. The leak had cracked the surface. And the world was finally starting to look up, wondering what, exactly, was going wrong with the biggest passenger plane in the sky. While speculation swirled online, Emirates remained outwardly calm. No press releases, no emergency statements, no acknowledgements of anything unusual. But inside Emirates operations control, the response had already shifted into high gear. Following internal recommendations, the airline began grounding select A380s under the cover of routine service. Aircraft that had once made daily long-haul journeys from Dubai to New York, Sydney, and London were quietly removed from flight schedules and sent to hangars in Dubai, Hamburg, and Manila. There were no public announcements. Instead, routes were adjusted. Some flights were reassigned to Boeing 777s. Others were temporarily suspended due to operational demands. To most travelers, it looked like the usual ebb and flow of an international airline. But to those watching closely, something didn't add up. Multiple Emirates. A380s, each less than 15 years old, were suddenly missing from the skies. Aviation enthusiasts noticed. Several aircraft tracking sites revealed that a growing number of Emirates A380s were spending weeks grounded with no clear reason. Some had even been ferried to less visible storage locations, away from prying eyes and media hubs. In truth, these aircraft weren't just waiting, they were being stripped, scanned, and reinforced. Engineers worked around the clock, examining every critical component near the wing root and surrounding fuselage. Wherever signs of microfractures appeared, components were either replaced or reinforced with specialized structural patches. The process was expensive, time-consuming, and delicate. And worse, there was no guarantee it would be enough. To avoid drawing attention, Emirates staggered the maintenance. No more than 3 aircraft were grounded at any one time in any single location. Flights were strategically canceled during off-peak periods. Customer service teams were instructed to deflect any inquiry with generic explanations. But the truth was undeniable. The A380 fleet was being silently pulled from the skies. To contain it, Emirates initiated a communications lockdown. Staff were warned not to speak to the media. Internal emails were encrypted. Even routine status updates were scrubbed of language that could hint at structural issues. But as we all know, it doesn't stop the world from noticing. What did Airbus know and hide? While Emirates battled to contain the situation, attention turned toward the aircraft's creator, Airbus. As the manufacturer of the A380, Airbus had access to extensive internal data, performance reports, and long-term fatigue studies. Over the years, they had collected millions of data points from sensors embedded across the aircraft's frame. Every takeoff, every landing, every high-stress moment had been logged and analyzed, which raised an uncomfortable question. How much did Airbus know, and how long had they known it? Behind closed doors, aviation authorities began asking for documentation. Internal engineering records from as far back as 2014 revealed something surprising. Airbus had already been monitoring potential fatigue-related stress in specific parts of the A380's wing structure. Their simulations had identified a few high-risk areas, particularly where composite materials and aluminum alloys met under repeated pressure cycles. In 2017, a confidential report shared with select Airbus partners highlighted minor but growing anomalies detected during long-term durability tests. The tone had been cautious, technical, nothing that would spark alarm. It mentioned a need for ongoing observation and recommended future design tweaks for any upcoming production runs. But there had been no major design overhaul. Instead, Airbus focused on cutting production costs and winding down the A380 program altogether. The aircraft, though iconic, had proven too large and expensive for the evolving demands of global airlines. Orders slowed, assembly lines shut down. By 2021, Airbus had officially announced the end of A380 manufacturing. Internally, this meant fewer resources were dedicated to its continued development. Ongoing structural evaluations were passed off as standard practice. The fatigue concerns never became public knowledge. For Airbus, the data was interesting, important even, but not urgent. Until Emirates called. The problem wasn't just negligence, it was underestimation. Airbus had trusted its numbers. The materials passed stress tests. The designs were within safe margins. But real-world flight conditions had exposed weaknesses that simulations didn't fully predict. Now, both Airbus and Emirates were locked in a shared crisis, one they couldn't undo, only manage. And with regulators beginning to dig deeper, the pressure to come clean was only getting stronger. Because when the world's biggest passenger plane shows cracks, someone has to take responsibility. So, in a closed-door summit held in Brussels, representatives from major civil aviation agencies, Airbus, and several airline CEOs met to address the growing issue. Engineers presented data, lawyers exchanged liability drafts, risk analysts outlined worst-case scenarios. The consensus was clear. Continued operation of the A380 was still safe, but only if monitored closely and reinforced where necessary. A global technical directive was drafted, recommending enhanced inspection protocols for all operating A380s, regardless of flight hours. For passengers, little changed on the surface, but behind the scenes, a new chapter of oversight had begun. Regulators, once trusting of the aircraft's robust reputation, were now watching with a sharper eye. And for the first time since its launch, the A380 was no longer seen as flawless. The aircraft was still flying, but under a global microscope. With the cracks exposed and the silence shattered, the aviation world now faces a difficult question. What comes next for the Airbus A380 and for Emirates? Behind the scenes, both companies are pushing forward with quiet urgency. Emirates has already implemented a rolling reinforcement program across its fleet, targeting high-stress areas with upgraded materials and reinforced structural brackets. Older A380s are being evaluated for early retirement, while younger ones are being brought in for advanced inspections and modification. Airbus, though no longer producing the A380, remains deeply involved. Their engineers are working alongside airline partners to create long-term solutions, replacement components, stress monitoring software upgrades, and even digital modeling tools to predict fatigue before it becomes dangerous. For now, aviation authorities have stopped short of grounding the A380 fleet. Instead, they've imposed stricter inspection intervals and reporting protocols. Every A380 in service must meet the updated safety checks, or it doesn't fly. It's a system built on caution, one that prioritizes prevention over reaction. As for passengers, most remain unaware of the full scope of what happened. And maybe that's for the best. After all, the A380 was never unsafe. It was simply showing signs of age, just like any machine pushed to its limits over time. Thanks to modern engineering, real-time monitoring, and rapid response, no lives were lost, but the lesson it delivered was loud and clear. No aircraft, no matter how advanced or iconic, is invincible, and beneath the polished metal and glowing cabin lights, everyone involved is watching a little closer, listening more carefully, and responding more quickly. Because the next chapter of aviation will be written not by perfection, but by how well we handle imperfection. That brings us to the end of the video. What do you think about the hidden defect that has just been found in Emirates A380s? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click on the following video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.